Well, welcome to another Videocast, NCYM. We have a special guest this morning, Mr. Steve Awtrey from St. Louis, Missouri. Steve was in youth ministry about 100 years, and he has driven a van full of youth ministers to NCYM for 50 years. He has been one of our counselors for the last 10 or 15 years at NCYM. He will be there this year in Daytona Beach, Lord willing, and he and others will be there to help us navigate this whole youth ministry, children's ministry deal here. So Steve's going to talk a few minutes about self-care and about what he's seen the last few years about taking care of ourselves. And then he has some points for us at the end. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be with everybody. And I appreciate what everybody does as far as working with teens and children. It's a tough thing. And it's good to be with you. And I hope that you'll find something out of this that'll be helpful for you.
We'll start us off, Steve, talking about what you've seen. The pandemic's going to get blamed for everything. But talk to us about what you've seen with ministry in particular.
Yeah. Well, I guess, first of all, youth and children's ministry is hard. It's hard. It's draining. And if we don't take care of ourselves, there's not a whole lot we can offer to others. And just 3 weeks ago, I was at church camp with the teenagers, and I came back. It was wonderful. I came back with a full heart, but a broken heart. I just hearing some of the stories of some of the teenagers, it was just so sad, just so many of those stories. And it reminded me of just how much harder it is today to do ministry to kids and teenagers, because you're working with kids that have such backstories that are just hard. And so it not only is affecting them, but it's affecting you because you care about them so much, which reminded me that we've got to make a priority in taking care of ourselves, because, like God said, or like Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. If you can't, so I'll change it. Love your teen as yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you won't have a whole lot to love those teenagers or those families. Back in 2003, I took my kids and my family. We went out to Colorado for spring break. We went on a skiing trip. And so we didn't have a car that could make it long distance that I could really trust. So I borrowed my parents' minivan. And so we get on the road, we start going out there. The check engine light came on. I was like, oh man, what's going on? So I called my dad. My dad was a mechanic in World War II. And so I said, Dad, the check engine light's on. What do I do? He said, you don't have to worry about it. Everything will be fine. So I trusted my dad. We kept driving, started getting a little rougher. And we got up to Leadville, the highest town in the continental United States at over 10,000 feet. We stopped. It was rough. I stopped at a mechanic shop. It died on me, started smoking, oil came down. And the mechanic came out. He said, well, hey, this looks pretty bad. I'm like, oh boy. It was one of the most helpless times I've ever had as a dad and as a husband. There wasn't much I could do. We're on top of a mountain. We're going to spend all week skiing, and my car wouldn't work. And God worked with that. I had a friend, Terry Bartlow, who lived in Colorado. His dad lived 30 minutes south of where I was. We got it fixed during the week and everything worked. But my point is, there's times when our check engine light comes on, and if we ignore it, it's not going to be good. If you see yourself physically, maybe high blood pressure, you're gaining weight, or stomach issues, something like that, that's check engine light. Or emotionally, you're feeling the stress, or you're just more irritable than you would normally be, or the anxiety's up, constant on guard with things, or even spiritually, just some unrepentant sin, or some addictions, some disappointments. Those are all check engine lights coming on. Or even relationship with your wife or other good friends you have. If there's misunderstandings, broken trust, just unresolved conflict, anger, those are all things saying, hey, check engine lights on. You need to look at yourself. And even looking in Scripture. God, He made the whole creation in 6 days, and on the seventh day, it said that He ceased from labor and was refreshed. And the Hebrew word for that is being refreshed. And so, one of the first things I would say to when you see the check engine light on, or even before that, what are some things that refresh you? I know for me, Cardinal baseball. Up until this season, Cardinal baseball has been something that's refreshed me. And I love sitting and watching Cardinal baseball. My wife wants to get off of cable because it's too expensive, and I'm like, I can't do that. In the evenings, I'll come in and just refresh myself with watching Cardinal baseball, or I'll go and exercise, or some things like that. Things that I like to do that is just refreshing. Woodworking is one of those things. During COVID, I just did, when I had some free time, which was more during COVID, I got out and I made a table for my daughter, made some things around the house and fixed some things. That was refreshing. That was very therapeutic for me. Things that I really enjoy doing. And one thing, like, right now we're in the midst of summer. And one thing Doug Fields said was, we have seasons of imbalance. And you have to sometimes prepare yourself for those seasons of imbalance, which I know for me in youth ministry, it was the summertime. And so I had to prepare for that. And it was during those times when I had to really make time to fill my bucket, because it was being drained every day. And it was important for me just to schedule some time with my family, because if I didn't, it would go by the wayside. It's just really important, some self-care, and do some things that refresh yourself. Moses, the story of Moses with Jethro. Jethro comes in and talks to Moses, and he's trying to save the world, save the Israelites. He was a judge, and he spent all day doing that. And one of the first times a couple months ago, I was reading about Jethro in that chapter, in the beginning of that chapter, before he tells him he needs to delegate some stuff. He was with his daughter and the grandkids, and I think he was thinking, oh man, Moses, you need to get over here with some of your kids. But he met with them. He said, what you're doing is not good. You need to delegate some people to do some of this work so that you have a little more free time. You're draining yourself. And in ministry, you know how that is, trying to find volunteers, but you got to really work at, just for your own self-care, getting some other people to do some of the work, so that you can rest. And some of it, you might be managing them. Sometimes that's more exhausting, but just you really have to look at your work schedule and make sure that you can delegate some stuff so that you can be fresh. Interesting thing with Joseph. Joseph was one of those guys that, man, everything went wrong for him. He was such a victim, but he never threw the victim card out. When he went to jail, back when Potiphar's wife made some sexual advances at him, he ran from that, and then she accuses him of sexually assaulting her. And so he goes to jail, and he could go to jail and just be real miserable. But it was really interesting when he was in jail, he must have done some things to take care of himself, because the things that he was able to do continued to put him at the top. And he saw the butler and the baker, and he saw them, and he was able to see that there was something wrong with them. And as I thought more about that, I thought, well, he was taking care of himself. He wasn't having a pity party for himself, but he was looking for ways to help others, and just how Joseph did that. Probably the best example of self-care is Jesus. In Mark 1:35, it said he got up very early in the morning, go out to spend some time with God. So that's one. But then a little later on in that chapter, in verse 7 of Mark chapter 6, he had all the disciples, he had sent them out, he brought them back. And when he brought them back, he was, the disciples, man, they were like, wow, they were, people were mobbing them because they were doing miracles, they were healing people. But Jesus was really sensitive, and he said, come with me by yourself to a quiet place to rest. So there was Jesus with his disciples with all this stuff that needed to be done. He said, guys, we need to get together and rest. I want you to tell me about the stuff you've done, and you guys need to take care of yourselves. So, in the Bible, we see that. And again, one thing, self-care, you can go overboard, you can be selfish, but self-care, if you're really taking your calling seriously, it's not selfish. You're doing that so that you can be a better minister. So those are some things that are important. So
Yeah. Well, Steve, I know at NCYM and specifically the people you've met with, it's been very good for them and all. What are some of the different things that you see that children's ministers and youth ministers struggle with? Just talk about that for a minute.
well, one thing is, a lot of times, like, you got a youth minister or children's minister in a small town, and they don't have anybody that they can go talk to. And that's one of the real strengths of NCYM, and through covenant groups and those types of things with that you have some contacts that you can just call them. And I would say one thing that we need to do to take care of ourselves is to have some safe relationships. And some of those, sometimes you can't just let everything down with an elder or with somebody from church, because it can be kind of dangerous. And having those safe relationships can be really energizing, and just they're so important to have those safe relationships, so that you can just, you're struggling with probably some of the same things that other youth minister or children's minister is struggling with. And I think it'd be great if the covenant groups had a regular Zoom, or you find the younger guys find an older guy that you say, hey, can we Zoom once a month and just having a mentoring relationship, or just some of the colleagues get together. I think that would be a great thing, because you have to pursue some safe relationships.
Yeah.
I think that's really, and we'll look at Jesus. He had his 12, but then he had Peter, James, and John, who went with him on the mountain for the transfiguration, went with him to Gethsemane. He had some of his special people in his inner circle, and we need to have that inner circle of safe relationships that you can get with. And again, I love NCYM. I'm so thankful that I continue to get to come back, and just one of the best parts of it isn't the classes, it's the networking you get to do, and the encouraging friendships that you have there. And now that we're through the COVID, we see that Zoom can be very helpful. Get a group, or just one other guy, and just Zooming seems to be a little better than talking on the phone, in my opinion. Maybe not, but just have those safe relationships, and you got to schedule them. Otherwise, you'll just go on and not have that time.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, any other pointers that you have for us? Safe relationships.
Yeah, safe relationships are important. Pursue joy and gratitude. That's one thing I've talked to people is get a gratitude journal, just that you can just be, 3 things you're thankful for that day. It can really, and again, so many of you guys are in hard situations. Find some of the things you can be grateful for with that. And it's the joy of the Lord is our strength in Nehemiah chapter 8. Let the joy of the Lord be what strengthens you as you move forward, and as you get into these situations that are draining. And another, Paul, again, he was in prison a lot, and then he tells them, rejoice in the Lord always. He pursued joy and gratitude even when he was going to prison for his faith. And and many times in ministry, you're getting crucified, not really, but you're getting
beat up,
and just really just trying to pursue joy and gratitude can give you some strength with that. Be balanced. That's another thing, is just, with those safe relationships, try to stay away from the toxic relationships that are out there. And I know you can't stay away from them, and many of them are those that you need to serve, but you got to be careful, because you spend all your time with the toxic people, they will make your heart toxic. So staying away from those. Get good sleep, eat well, exercise well. That's foundational to any self-care, doing that. And then also serve people. And in your ministry, you're always serving somebody. And when you're serving them, remember you're serving Jesus when you're doing that. And Carl Menninger, he was a popular psychiatrist back in the early 1900s, and before the time of antidepressants and stuff. And he would prescribe to some of his patients, just go out and serve somebody. When you do that, you get out of yourself, and you can feel good and just have purpose. And that's our calling, is having purpose and just really serving people and doing it with joy. So
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you for coming to NCYM, and look forward to seeing you in Daytona Beach. And if you don't mind, let me share your email on this post, and any of you folks that are listening to this that need somebody to talk to, a safe place, as Steve talked about. He does this all the time and all year. When he meets with people at NCYM, they call him during the year for just checking up and on. And we got to have that in our life, to have that place we can go and say,
yes,
you
yes,
know,
we do, absolutely. I welcome that.
yeah,
So
okay. All right, brother. Well, blessings to you. And you got another half season here. We just did the All-Star game. The Cardinals could
I know,
pick it up. I
Yeah,
look forward to our one-time game sometime in
yeah,
September. Go ahead and
I know. Me too. We got to talk about that. Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
All
Well,
right,
good,
God.
and God bless you guys. You guys are out there. You guys are doing some great work. I know it's hard, and just kind of God bless you guys.